I look. Oh, I'm a mess. I'm sorry. Our class is better.
Muted. Just testing the mic here.
I have the boringest office ever.
Hi.
Emily, thank you for that reminder. I'd completely forgotten about the reading part of it.
Oh, I'm sorry you had forgotten, but I am glad I sent the reminder then.
Hi, Phoebe.
Hi.
Are you okay to go first, Phoebe?
Yeah. I was just spending the last few minutes like desperately figuring out what I was going to pick, and I found something, so it helps I have everything here.
Perfect.
How long do we have for reading? I should have asked that before now.
10 to 12 minutes, but it's okay if you go like 1 or 2 minutes over.
Okay. Here's where I admit I didn't pick out my reading yet. I'm looking.
You have time since you're last.
Well, actually, I might just do 2 really short flash pieces. Bring blurred back up. Super self-promoting background.
Hi, everybody. So it is noon here on the East Coast, and we're going to get into our next session. I'm Jill Belli. I'm an associate professor of English here at City Tech and one of the Symposium co-organizers, giving one a brief break for a moment. And I just want to say a quick note of gratitude to the amazing undergrad students we just heard from at Georgia Tech Sci-Fi Lab. To shout out to my own science fiction students here at City Tech who are in attendance right now, and to all the students who are joining us here today for the symposium. Now we're in the future, and we do have another undergraduate panel coming up later at 3:10, so please stay tuned for that. So my role here is just a brief note of introduction for this upcoming session put out by Analog. It's our writers panel and an award announcement, and mostly a deep note of gratitude for our friends over at Analog who have been longstanding collaborators with the Symposium and all things science fiction here at City Tech. We are honored to have Analog editor Trevor Quachri here today, managing editor Emily Hockaday, and a number of amazing writers over at Analog. So with that, I will turn it over to Emily.
Thank you, Jill, and thanks to Wynette too for organizing this wonderful event. I look forward to it every year. So my name is Emily Hockaday. My pronouns are she, her, and I'm the senior managing editor of Analog Science Fiction and Fact and Asimov Science Fiction. Today, I have 3 Analog authors joining me: Phoebe Barton, Chana Kohl, and Marie Vibbert, each of whom will read a piece of fiction, after which we'll discuss writing science fiction and how that relates to this year's theme of gender and sexuality. I'm delighted to introduce you to Phoebe Barton, who will be reading first. Phoebe Barton is a queer trans science fiction writer. Her short fiction has appeared in Analog, Lightspeed, and Kaleidotrope, and her story, The Mathematics of Fairyland, won the Aurora Award for Best Short Story in 2022. She lives with her family, a robot, and many books in Hamilton, Ontario, Canada.
Hi, thanks for that introduction, Emily. So today I will, I had forgotten until I was reminded moments before this started that a reading was part of it. So I scrambled to find one in tune with the subject. And so I'm going to be reading the story "And Prison on My Back," which appears in the anthology Luminescent Machinations. And if it had not appeared there, it would have gone to Analog pretty soon after. So it is still that kind. It is very much that kind of story. The rough and rusted ground grinds beneath my wheels and paints my trailer dust red. I am a truck. I was not always a truck. The warden has never told me this, but I know it is as true as the poison in the soil. You are a criminal. The warden is correct. The warden is always correct. I am a criminal. I was always a criminal. Your speed is suboptimal in this terrain. Increase to 60 kilometers per hour. I accelerate and follow the route the satellites have mapped for me. It is a digital ribbon tied between mountains and craters. I will follow it all the way to New Mars City, which I once hoped to destroy through my socioeconomic perversion. That is what the warden says. When my cargo is delivered, I will make New Mars City stronger and more resilient. It is not the first cargo I have delivered to New Mars City. It will not be the last. All cities are fragile. It will take many cargoes before I may be judged free of perversion. But I do not want to be free of perversion. My dreams exist mostly in darkness. The warden says that this is the cost of my crime. From time to time, when the warden is receiving software updates, dreams come in flashes of light and familiarity. I see with eyes that are not cameras and move with feet that are not tires. I breathe with a throat scraped raw by my anger and speak with lips made soft and warm. Each time this happens, the warden makes its fury known. It sends punishing electricity through me, reminding me that what I feel is a fraction of the pain I caused New Mars City with my crimes. That is its function. I cannot be allowed to forget the cost of perversion. It forces me to remember when the police burst in on Saha and I indulging in our perversions, undermining the stability of New Mars City and charting paths for our fellow perverts to abandon society, when they beat me with sticks and fists until I was nothing but pain, when they set me on the hard and dusty path to socioeconomic redemption. Most of my other memories are locked away, but there is no such thing as a perfect lock. Before I was a truck, I know I was in a body that was wrong, rugged and craggy and dry. I know there were people who tried to help me. The warden has never mentioned them, and I hope they are not also trucks now. It is good that the warden cannot erase what few memories I have. Angry embers flicker in the darkness of my dreams, and without the kindling of memories, that is all they will ever be. Before I was a truck, I had hands. Now I do not. That is one reason why Supervisor Pretorius rides in my cab. There are some problems that need hands to solve, such as a malfunctioning primary antenna. It is dangerous to travel with malfunctions. Just because I am a truck does not mean I cannot die. The antenna has been malfunctioning for 43 minutes, and I have exhausted all the ways I could correct it. Supervisor Pretorius is supposed to be alert and ready for such problems while I am operating, but when I look into my cab, I find him asleep. Remaining alert and ready must be a difficult job. Since the backup antennas still work, I fill the cab with loud music. He startles awake with language that would be taken as more evidence of perversion, were I to speak that way. What the hell's your problem? Are you broken or what? That is correct. I tell him about the antenna issue. You will need to conduct an EVA to effect repairs. He looks outside at the cold and rocky landscape. The sun is high in the sky and there is no trace of dusty storms or devils. It is as pleasant as Mars is capable of being. Hell to that, he grumbles. Wrenchers can fix it when we get back. I have already logged this as a maintenance issue, I say. It is wise to maintain detailed records. If you do not attempt to effect repairs before reaching base, the cost of repairs will be deducted from your pay. Supervisor Pretorius uses more perverse language as he dons his EVA suit. Maybe he thinks he is being treated like a criminal. As he exits the airlock, the warden allows me a shiver of dopamine. Proper maintenance is essential. Remember what is necessary for redemption. I watch through external cameras as Supervisor Pretorius diagnoses the antenna. It appears that its housing needs to be cleaned out. Maybe one day I will be allowed a manipulator arm so that I can perform such work myself, but I would understand if New Mars City does not want its criminals to be armed. It does not take him long to correct the issue, and when he does, the radio shouts with urgency. Mayday. The voice is calm and unhurried. This is VZR325 experiencing fuel cell malfunction, batteries at 19%. Require immediate assistance at coordinates. I listen carefully to the message. They are not far away. It is possible that I am the closest responder. I do not hear anyone answer the distress call. It is possible that I am the only one who can hear it. I tell Supervisor Pretorius about the Mayday. He swears again, but does not hesitate to hurry back inside. He knows as well as I do that ignoring this would make him a criminal. Mars is cruel enough without human indifference. Once he is in, I accelerate to my utmost while he answers the Mayday. If I could drop my cargo, I could proceed even faster, but abandoning a cargo is criminal behavior. The warden would never permit it. It takes 46 minutes for me to reach VZR325's location. I would have arrived sooner if not for an inconveniently steep crater blocking the direct path. VZR325's crew is still alive, but there were no guarantees of that during my journey. Mars knows how to kill quickly. I feel pain and frustration that I could not get there earlier. The warden allows me those feelings. Pain and frustration are the costs of perversion. VZR is a rover built for speed instead of endurance. It rests in the carved bed of a long-dead waterway, another reminder of Mars's cruelty. There will be no more death here if there is anything I can do about it. Supervisor Pretorius, with his arms and legs, is the one who can actually do something about it. He unspools a long cable from my chassis and carries it to VZR325's side. My fuel cells are working fine and my batteries are at full charge. I will have no problems lending VZR325 enough charge to reach the closest rest stop. It is the proper thing to do. Supervisor Pretorius plugs and locks the cable in place. There is an electric hum as my chassis systems negotiate with VZR325, verifying our software compatibility. There is the unsurprising notice that VZR325's operating system is not fully compatible and requires me to install a patch to ensure the charging does not go awry. You are authorized to proceed. Abandonment of a vehicle in distress is criminal behavior. The warden is correct. I begin the installation. Fresh code charges across the cable into my chassis. Program after program is refreshed and verified. In seconds, the update will be complete and I will help rescue VZR325. The warden will take note of my heroic behavior and perhaps my next punishments will be milder. This it will say, this is what it will take for you to rejoin society. You must remember, the warden does not complete its lesson. The warden has never left the lesson incomplete. While I am contemplating this, a surge of code and electricity cascades through the cable. I hear light and taste thunder and feel the warden crash. The cage it was installed to guard, the cage it meant to hold me in, rusts and crumbles in an instant. Oh God. Oh, fuck. I know I'm not broken. I'm Ava. I'm a brain torn from its body and thrown into a steel prison with no adrenal glands to make dopamine and no gut flora to gift serotonin. I know I'm supposed to feel terrified, lost, and furious, but I only have the shadows of emotions now. It's the difference between looking at a picture of Mars and being there. New Mars City decided I was broken because of who I am, because of what I advocated, because of who I love. Now that the warden isn't looking over my metaphorical shoulder, I can remember and be certain that it's a city that's broken. And I will end it there.
Thank you so much, Phoebe. Do you mind holding up that book again so that people can see where they can read the rest of it?
This is Luminescent Machinations from Neon Hemlock.
Thank you so much. That was very engaging. I am definitely gonna find the rest of it. So up next, we have Chana Kohl. Chana Kohl works in Jerusalem in clinical trials and research, writing speculative fiction in her spare time. Her stories have appeared in Luna Station Quarterly, Stupefying Stories, and Metastellar. As recipient of the 2022 Analog Emerging Black Voices Award, her professional debut will appear in Analog Science Fiction and Fact next year. For more updates, please visit her blog at chanakohl.wordpress.com.
Thank you, Emily. So today I'm going to read The Warrior Tree from Luna Station Quarterly. You might can't see it. It's issue 52. So I'll just begin. From the moment I was born, my parents knew I would need to fight to find my place in this world. That is why they named me Faiza, the victorious one. 10 perfect fingers and 10 perfect toes. It's what every mother checks when they see their newborn the first time. But when the midwife brought me to my mother, she felt the universe pivot. She said it was something in the way the old woman's eyes refused to meet hers. I was born with ectrodactyly. Taking me into her arms, my mother examined for herself my tiny hands, thumbs but no fingers, stretched up towards a world that would recoil from them. She looked into my eyes, too innocent to understand the guilt and shame she would endure silently, needlessly because of me. Still, my mother told me she fell in love the instant she held me. I was born during the most festive time of the year in Morocco. So my father, a sheep farmer, slaughtered a ram the day I was born, sharing it with neighbors, and then another 7 days later. He knew raising a girl, his only daughter, with different needs and appearance, would be a burden in our remote village. Still, he was thankful. The years of lead were evaporating. A new century and political reforms were on the horizon. He always told his children anything was possible. Wedged between the rain shadow of the anti-Atlas and the salt lick of the Sahara, the tiny Amazic village where I grew up lay next to fields of saffron stretched under lucerne skies. Most men eked out meager livelihoods from saffron, olives, and cereal wheat between the years of drought. It was beginning to exact a toll. The dry years seemed to come more frequently and last longer. The women, in contrast, were master carpet weavers, Known from Agadir to Marrakesh for their nimble skills, they passed the sacred tradition from mother to daughter, encoded in their maternal DNA. But not my DNA. When I turned 16, a time when most girls proved their feminine virtues by sitting at the loom and learning intricate patterns or working in the Argon Collective with lightning quick fingers, I worked and tended the fields. Several crops were needed for dyeing carpet wool, madder, indigo, and turmeric. Caring for the plants from the time they were furrowed until they were ready to harvest made me feel useful to my family. That was important to me. So while some of the older women sat and gossiped, combing and spinning strands of wool for dyeing, I watered and weeded, coaxing my delicate flowers to bloom. And this is what I hoped I'd do for the rest of my days, at least until the day my father came from Tiznit with news that would change my life forever. I saw him walking towards me in the field and knew exactly what he was going to say. Who? I asked. I sat beneath an old argan tree. It swayed and bowed from the desert headwinds, but never completely buckled. Hot, salty tears left their streak marks down my face. I planted my hands in the rocky soil, wishing I was the one who could take root. The feeling my family was abandoning me, finally throwing off the burden they received the day I was born, sat on my chest like a heavy stone. My mother came and sat down beside me. It's natural to be afraid. She wrapped her arms around me. So was I when the time came to marry your father. My head rested on her bosom as I spent those last moments of my childhood listening to her calming words, the same balm mothers soothed their daughters with since betrothals began. I wondered how many times those same words had been whispered beneath those branches. Sometimes we don't have a choice in the matter, but it doesn't mean you won't grow to love him. I wondered how she could be so sure. My parents knew each other their entire lives. From the time my father finished school, there was never any question they'd end up together. It's not as if he's very old, she explained. These days, 42 is still considered young for a man. I'll have been 90. The most important thing is that he has a job. At this, my head raised, prepared to voice the protest building inside. So you admit it? Admit what? My mother was genuinely confused. Maybe she thought I'd be happy or relieved they found someone for me to marry. But the reason you're sending me away to live with a man, a widower I've never met, whose children are older than I am, is because of money? If we were richer, I could go to school like girls in Rabat, maybe even attend a university. I had always excelled in school, but like most girls in my village, I stopped at 8th grade. Depending on family straits, some quit even earlier. But my oldest brother, Adil, was a carpet trader in Marrakesh, where he said it was acceptable, even considered normal, for girls to attend high school, and sometimes beyond that. Where are you getting these ideas? Girls in the city have lower moral standards. Hassan Hadid will make a good husband and needs a good, devout wife. And what about these? I raised my arms and showed her the hands that were given to me, the only hands I'd known, the hands that always invited stares, the ones I always tried to hide. Would my new husband be ashamed of them also? He knows about your condition and doesn't object. This is important. You want a husband who will treat you with respect, He will treat you well because his business prospects depend on it. And that is when I knew the man they'd chosen for me did not really want to marry me, only my family's wool. Please don't do this, I begged her. Faiza, it's time you grow up and face reality. The weaving cooperative will never take you, and you cannot work in these fields forever. This is the best option. Or would you rather move to the city and work as a maid? Do you know what happens to your reputation if you do? I knew my parents were doing what they thought was best. I did not argue with her. It wasn't as if I didn't know this day might eventually come. What I did not know was how far I would go to resist. That's it.
Thank you so much, Hannah. Is the story out there where people can find the rest of it if they want to?
The story is online for free at lunastationquarterly.com. You can, it's issue 52, and you can just search Chana Kohl, and you can find out how this story actually turns into science fiction.
Thank you so much. I'm sure people will follow that. I'll find the link in just a minute and put it in the chat. Up next, we have Marie Vibbert. Hugo and Nebula nominated author Marie Vibbert has written over 90 short stories, 14 in analog, as well as 3 novels, dozens of poems, and a few comics and video games. She played women's professional football for 5 years and first appeared on Wikipedia for her research into historical hats. By day, she is a computer programmer in Cleveland, Ohio.
Yes, and I'm actually in my work office. This is my lunch break. So this is the Case Western Reserve University campus behind me, virtually. You didn't want to see a boring office wall. I'm going to start by reading a very short flash piece called Football on Mars. So you want to know why we stopped playing football on Mars? Let me tell you why we started. Sequestered in our domes, in the close air of our own unwashed smell, we got hungry for the outdoors. Carefully stepping around too much equipment and too little space, we got hungry for violent impacts. And there was always more time than entertainment back then. I was on the Geological Survey, and I found this sulfur limestone that made a sweet, bright strike like lemonade. I was never much of an artist, but I used it to make some straight lines decorating around our site. Your gran, she got the idea to turn them into a field. We reinforced our suit joints with tape and got some insulation padding. Your grandmother sewed a ball together from some bits of scrap. We didn't waste ammo on inflating it, so it was just full of cut tube ends. You ought to watch those first games before we figured out how to catch in low gravity. A bunch of thin scientist geeks in cumbersome suits flailing around with the collective skill of a puppy in a paddling pool. Your gran was the only one of us who could stay upright from one end zone to the next. And that's why we made her running back. We should have made her quarterback, but I was too full of myself in those days. No, we didn't stop because of him. The quartermaster never did like us tackling, sure, made it hard for us to keep the suits in repair. Every now and then, someone would get sky bite, and he'd be off on a tear to health and safety. So we just piled on more tape, covered it up, and kept playing. We all had blue-black scars on our wrists, and the quartermaster took to hiding the tape. Your gran and I, one of us would distract him, and the other would pinch the tape. Sometimes we needed someone to sit out the whole game pretending to have an inventory mix-up just to keep him out of the way. That's how I missed our first championship, even though I was the quarterback for the Eastern Crater Rim Easter Bunnies. We beat the Horticulture Dome Herding Cats 21-6. No, we didn't stop playing because they built the Rec Dome. Why would we stop because it got safer? You're really hung up on this. If you want to start it up again, just do it. I tried, but for years, it was like you couldn't say the word football. They'd look at me like I was mangling a corpse and say, not you of all people. But it was worth it. It was, for a moment. You should have seen her smile when she made that last touchdown, the triumph and the joy. She didn't even notice the cracks in her faceplate until the battle between structure and pressure tipped. I still hear the tink and ping of the shards in my nightmares. But go on already. Don't waste time thinking about what we did and why. Go do it yourself. Start again. We were chicken shit. No, your gran was not the reason we stopped playing football on Mars. She was the reason we started. All wild frontiers are pushed by people who run forward, grinning, never looking back. That was Football on Mars. The first time I successfully sold a story about football. I've been trying for a long time. There's a very little overlap in that Venn diagram between science fiction geeks and football geeks. I'm working to expand it. And I'm just going to read the beginning of this next story, which is, it came out in Clark's World, my latest piece in Clark's World, which is called Cheaper to Replace. And I thought you guys might appreciate this because it's free online. I can just read the beginning and you can go back and read the rest. Cheaper to Replace. Han tried not to look at the greasy fingerprints marking the seams on James' silicone skin. How do you feel, James? Dizzy. He swung his legs against the workbench in perfect imitation of the teen he resembled. But not as much as before. The IT guy mashed his hands in an oily towel. He had thick forearms and a purple skull cap. I replaced the gyroscopic components, but that's not the source of the problem. His balancing processing's all screwed up. The gyros are getting banged around. Whatever I put in there is going to wear out the same. Han did not like the IT guy. Can he learn to compensate? Well, I don't know. You could hire a specialist to tweak his program. Don't think there are any out-of-the-box solutions available. He's too old. Honestly, I think the whole processing unit has to go. Otherwise, you're going to have a robot in a wheelchair inside 2 months. He raised his eyebrows at Han, expectant, like this was a door he was holding open to her. Han thrust her arm between the IT guy and James. Come on, we're going home. Hey, don't be like that. I did my best work on this kid. I tell you what, we'll buy him off you for the price of the parts. That's more than you'd get anywhere else. Give you something towards a new one. No, thank you. James took her hand and stood up slowly, not tugging like a real boy would. Han loved his gentleness, even though on an intellectual level, she knew he was a puppet controlled by libraries of commands. He'd been some rich family's unwanted toy dumped on the university as a tax write-off. But Han liked to think that he had once been loved, the cherished caregiver to a lonely child, maybe, or a stand-in for never visiting grandchildren. The IT guy's voice echoed after them in the basement hallway. It'll be cheaper to replace him than to fix him. Anyone will tell you that. A parking garage separated the biomedical research building from the School of Medicine main building. When they were almost halfway across the yellow hashed walk, the light at the entrance of the garage blacked out, followed by a scrape of metal on concrete and the roar of a gasoline engine. Han ducked behind James and prayed that Dr. Narayanan was paying attention. It could only be Dr. Narayanan. Dr. Narayanan's legendary 1975 Ford LTD Brougham swung in within a foot of them. Its blocky frame rocked like a ship, exposing the wheel wells as it turned into its special double-width parking spot, where it huffed like a wearied dragon and settled its sparkly brown carapace to rest. Han was shaking from the near miss. James hugged her. You're all right now, he said. Some routine noticed the facial features of fear or the action of cringing and prompted his soothing words. Her heart broke for the nameless programmers. They didn't have to code that, but they did. The IT department was our last hope, James. Dr. Brescia doesn't want you back. I'm sorry. His hair smelled like her old Barbie doll and clung to her wet cheek. That's okay. A bang echoed through the underground lot, the heavy door of the LTD. Dr. Narayanan strutted by, swinging her car keys on one finger. Get a room, kids, she said in passing. Han stepped back from James and wiped her eyes. She watched Dr. Narayanan step through the biomedical research building door. Could Han ever be that confident, that assertive? We'll just move you out of the lab. And I'll break there. That's the first scene to give you a taste.
Thank you so much, Marie. And thank you for putting the link in the chat for anyone who wants to read the rest of it there, as are other links for Hannah's story, and the link to the anthology that Phoebe's story is from. Before I launch into questions, because I do have questions prepared, I just want to mention to those who are listening, please feel free to throw any questions in the Q&A box. I'll be monitoring it, and we are happy to answer questions about writing, reading, being a science fiction writer or fan, and then also questions that have to do with the theme this year. So, like many readers, I came to science fiction as a child, reading Nancy Farmer and Edward Eger and Ray Bradbury, and it didn't occur to me until I was older that many of the classics in the genre had problems with gender and sexuality. I leaned toward writers like Anne McCaffrey and Mercedes Lackey in my teenage years, probably because they wrote women writers with agency, which was something that I didn't see that much and I wanted to actively seek out. So to the panel, when did you all come to science fiction as readers? And when, if ever, did you reckon with the way classic and even some modern science fiction handles gender?
I'll start. I didn't want to, but I will. I always read science fiction. When I was a kid, I remember I would choose my library books based on whether there were stars on the cover or a number in the title. I was very snobbishly pro science fiction. I had a crush on Andre Norton because he wrote women so well. I was actually disappointed to find out Andre Norton was a woman. And like many readers in my age, I'm old. So, I'm reading in the 80s and 90s, and we were just expected to identify with the male characters. And my awakening to the sexism came rather startlingly when I was on a Heinlein kick, and I was reading a lot of Heinlein, and I reached Friday, and it was just awful. And I realized part of the problem was like and I accidentally got into an argument with a man about it, who said, you just don't like that his female characters like to have sex. And I'm like, no, the problem is his female characters don't like to have sex. They say things like, I'll have sex with that man because he deserves it. Not, I'll have sex with that man because he hot. No, oof. Yeah, it was an awakening.
Thank you. That is very relatable.
Phoebe?
Okay. So for me, I came through into reading because my mom had a shelf of Star Trek tie-in novels when I was a kid. I wasn't really aware of short fiction or anything like that. And Star Trek was, considering the alternatives like Heinlein and so on, Star Trek was a pretty good place to start. In terms of gender, it's something that I've been interrogating myself about like over the past few years, because it made a lot more sense when I realized that I was trans, because I had gender was something that it always seemed kind of strange and odd to me, and like not really feeling it the way other people did. And it was it was something I started to focus on more and notice both in my writing and in other writing when I was processing those feelings myself as I got older. And one of those feelings of processing I turned into a story that appeared in Analog in 2017 called just bringing it up again, that was Where the Flock Wanders in the May-June 2017 issue. So it was always more of like something that seemed at arm's length to me, and something that was like an investigation.
Thank you. Hannah?
Thank you. So I started reading science fiction in high school. A lot of times it was an assignment. I think my senior year English thesis was on Arthur C. Clarke's 2001 Space Odyssey. And I think I threw in some John Milton Paradise Lost. But I didn't notice it. I didn't notice it at that time. And then I started doing more serious reading in college. Walter Miller, Chana Kohl for Leibowitz. And I guess for me, as far as cognizance, that didn't come until way after college. I think seeing the world outside of your nest clues you into the issues more. And for sure, a lot of the stories that I reread as a working, independent, emancipated adult certainly struck me differently than when I read them the first time as an adolescent. So, but still, even when I saw that, I didn't feel a compulsion to change anything. I think when I got older and I moved into a different world and culture and language, that compelled me more to find agency and write my own voice into things and hope it resonates with them. So, yeah, that's it.
Thank you. I think for a lot of readers as children, getting into science fiction, it is something that we didn't notice, for better or worse. And as Marie also mentioned, we were expected to just identify with the male characters. They were always doing things. I was also reading science fiction in children's science fiction in the 90s, and it was definitely like 9 times out of 10, it was just like, you will identify with this male character. They're the one.
I think that's why I used to hate romance in stories. I was like, ugh, not another romance. Because I'm so straight. I just couldn't.
Well, also, I think for a lot of these writers, it was hard to write women characters, which is why the leads were always men. And so the romances never felt, like you mentioned with Heinlein's, the romances never felt believable. And that isn't sexy. So that question was taking a look at the past, but my next question is looking at present science fiction and also toward the future. Since we're a forward-thinking genre, many writers like Anne Leckie and Martha Wells handle societies and characters outside the gender binary and have been doing so for some time. What do you think contemporary science fiction is getting right and wrong with writing gender?
I don't want to go first every time, guys. Okay. I love that you brought up Anne Leckie's and Martha Wells non-binary protagonists, who are both like kind of transhuman too, being a ship AI and a murder bot. But I like very much exploring the non-binary of gender, because what it means for me to be female is not what it means to other people. I even remember getting criticized on some of my stories, like, Marie, your women are not women, they're just men with boobs. And I'm like, I am a man with boobs. That's what a woman is. But for other people, that's not true. And I don't know. I really liked when Phoebe said that, like, that she was reading stories and gender didn't make sense to her, because I feel the same way. Even though I'm a cis het female, I feel that gender is a construction, and we need to deconstruct it. So I'm excited about that. I've written some story. I wrote one story where it was in a future without gender. And it was also, I could use this, well, it was a future where being agender was the norm. And it was also, I could use the line, you know, I perform gender on Sundays. You know, one of my fathers wears a ball cap to church, and I am a woman today because it's Sunday. Wouldn't that be nice if you could just take it off, put it back on?
Yeah, that's that whole aspect of taking it off and taking it off is something. One of the ways I started to interrogate this, because the story Where the Flock Wanders was one of I wrote it early on, like when I was like coming to terms with myself, and what I came with from the protagonist there was this idea of someone opting out of gender, because like even at that time it's like, imagine like all these things, all these expectations, like all these things that are like baked into it. Wouldn't be so much easier if you just didn't have to deal with any of those, and you could approach situations like on your own, like without all of that assumed baggage. And I think that's the sort of like speculation that's so much more worthwhile these days in science fiction, because science fiction has spent 100 years like speculating about like the next new machine, or what it's like to fuck on Mars and that sort of thing. And like those are valid things, but the explorations of gender especially is something that it didn't really do much, because especially considering its heyday of if you consider the 50s a heyday for science fiction, considering how many markets there were back then, it was the standard. It was like, oh, there are two genders, and like why would we bother questioning that, because we all know that is the case. And I think there's a lot of inertia that is still there, and it's a good area for exploration.
I I think that's enlightening for me. I would say, Emily, that as far as like in contemporary science fiction, one of the things that they're doing right with presenting gender is presenting both sides of the coin and then leaving it open for the reader to flip. I found a good example of that in Isabel Kem's Homecoming is just another word for the sublimation of self in Clark's World. I really like the way that she, through exploring family relationships and defining what's home in that situation of immigrating, that she adjusts how gender plays into it. So it wasn't the theme, but it was there, and you had to consider it. You know, this was a lot of her role in her family was affected by, as Phoebe said, the expectations that come with a particular gender. As far as what could be we could see more of, I'm not going to say wrong, is more non-Western perspectives and the historical trajectories on other continents. You know, where some places in Africa and Asia, matriarchy has already been normalized. And those societies might not have the same goals as our American aspirations. And so how that evolves for them and it might not evolve at the same pace and might not end up at the same destination, but those are also valid perspectives to explore.
I agree. Thank you so much for bringing that perspective. I have a question in the Q&A window that relates to this. The question reads, while I love Martha Wells' Murderbot series, as well as some of her others, a thing I would like to ask is, while robots and aliens and so on are relatively frequent protagonists of science fiction, a large portion of SF media and even non-SF media, such as She-Ra and the Princess of Power, have come under criticism for only having NB characters as robots, aliens, and shapeshifters, rather than allowing humans, like plenty are in real life, to be non-binary or gender fluid. Do you think there is validity to this criticism, or is the extra layer of separation allowing more people who wouldn't normally be willing to consider these concepts, consider them, worth the loss of depiction that it applied to us as humans too?
I think it's definitely true that there are more depictions as robots. And like the two examples, they were both robots. Steven Universe, I think, is the only property I've seen that had multiple non-binary characters in it. I mean, on, popular media. I mean, in books and in short fiction, I think we do a better job.
I will say that while you're right about Anne Leckie's trilogy having the protagonists be AI and non-binary, she actually has a lot of human non-binary characters too, like in addition. Like the recent one, Translation State.
In Translation State, they have
the
a
protagonist
culture
is,
with a different attitude towards,
right. And then the one before that was also like human, characters with some AI, but that are on different gender spectrums and some non-binary. So I feel like we do see it. But it's true that it's, especially in like pop culture, like I don't think like people are going out specifically seeking like these like lesser known Anne Leckie books like I am. In like very easy to access pop culture, it is there. I feel like non-binary characters are relegated to like not human or not quite human.
Star Trek Discovery did do that. Also, they had a, or was it just that the actor was non-binary?
No, the character was,
Gray, right?
Yeah, one of the main characters. Yeah, that's true.
And it
Star Trek
makes
has always been
perfect sense for a
forward.
Trill, right? Right, Trekkies?
Yeah.
Trills would totally be very gender fluid. But
So thank you for that question. The next one, and feel free to add more, anyone. The next question I have, unless a panelist any other panelists want to handle that one.
Okay, yeah. I was gonna seeing if Hannah had anything to say, but I feel that in regard to the criticism, I feel it's in like in the past, like it would have been a lot more feasible, like say like the 70s or so on, when this was something that was really not known among the mainstream. Like I can see that, but now at this point, like I think if you're doing the whole like the NBs are robots and shapeshifters and aliens, and I think that's something to seriously reconsider as part of the world you are writing and the characters that you are choosing, because this is not it's not like this is arcane knowledge anymore, and it shouldn't be treated like the only way the mainstream can understand this is by having it be strange and weird and alien.
I agree. Thank you. Hannah, did you have anything you wanted to add to this? No. We'll move on to the next question. This one I wanted to have Marie touch on first, but then I will check in with Hannah and Phoebe because they will probably also have opinions. But I know that Marie has spent time researching gender, like bylines, and like trying to figure out the gender of the author based on the bylines throughout throughout history, classic magazines. So basically, I was wondering if you could tell us a little bit about that research and any trends you might have noticed.
Okay. And if you go to my website, just go to works nonfiction and you will find I put all of my data sets on open science frameworks. So they're freely available. But one thing I noticed is that women write more women and they write more non-binary characters. I did a follow-up research on the BSFA awards and I found no non-binary characters written by men. Do better, men. But that was just a small sample set. I'm sure there's plenty of men writing non-binary characters. Another thing I found was when there are more female authors, there are more female characters. And that male authors write more female characters when there are more female authors around. So, we're changing minds and we're moving goalposts. I also found that there was a huge backlash in the 2000s where there's a giant dip in female author representation in the early 2000s to about 2005, where it starts to slowly eke back up to the heydays of the 90s. I found that some editors can make a positive impact. Specifically, Ben Bova in the 70s created this like peak of female authors in Analog. And Trevor Quachri, when he took over Analog, he ramped up the female author representation. Just gonna brown nose a little right there. They're awesome. And I found that while female authors seem to be using initials to publish under at about the same rate today as they did in the past. It's interesting, like not all women, it's not like we all used initials in the 60s and then changed. It seems to be very much an individual choice. Male authors used to predominantly use, a large section of male authors used initials to publish under in the early days in the 30s and 40s. And drop off significantly after the 50s and 60s. But male authors are starting to pick them up again now. I don't know, just some weird facts that I gleaned from my research.
Thank you. I found that research when you presented it at the symposium a few years back. I found it so fascinating, the data, just seeing it. It's really incredible. If you have a chance, listeners and watchers, definitely check out the data on Marie's website. There are so many beautiful graphs. It's really incredible. I wanted to reach out to Phoebe and Hannah and see if they had anything to say. Phoebe, I know that you're a collector of classic SF magazines, so maybe you've noticed some things there.
Yeah, what I've noticed is that in part, like two things, that there was in the very early days, there were more women authors than you might expect, thinking back on just with historical assumptions. But then others were like, also you have like women authors who like never appear again, which is also which is a shame because so many potential perspectives cut short, and with such a male-dominated genre in the days after. And Marie did touch on this as well. And one of the things that did come into mind was in June 1977, Ben Bova did do this Analog special women's issue, which like the screwfly solution appeared here, which is very, very, very gender, but then it also reflects how it was the whole idea of getting more women perspectives was like something that required like active pushing, because even then, even in this issue, this contains a story by George R.R. Martin as a part of a serial.
Thank you for bringing up that issue. I read that issue, but during the like lead up to the 90th anniversary year, I went back and I read all these stories, classic stories in analog written by women throughout the decades to figure out what I was going to end up reprinting for my editorial that year. And then of course it was Anne McCaffrey. Should have predicted, because she was like my first big science fiction love. But I almost reprinted The Screwfly Solution because I was so enraptured with how just like unabashedly feminist it was, that it was just like, this is what women are afraid of, you know. And it felt like, oh, and when I was reading it in 2019 or 2018, one of those years like leading up to that anniversary in 2020, I felt like this is still too relevant. Like this is still something. Women are still afraid of this violence, you know, this gendered violence. If you haven't read it, it's a really, it's horror. I mean, it is just real horror, but it's excellent. It's an excellent story. Yeah, so Phoebe, you're right. There have always been a surprising number of women writers out there writing excellent fiction in a male-dominated, you know, genre. It's good to remember that.
And I did find in my research that basically there was this steady 10% of authors from the very beginning that were discoverably female. Another interesting thing is that the founding editor at FNSF, Boucher, I think was his name, was accused of quote unquote publishing a monstrous regiment of women. But if you look at the stats, it was like, yeah, FNSF started off with a full 20% female authors, which was an outlier at the time.
I want that monstrous regiment.
Right.
Chana, if you don't have anything on this, I will I'll hop to the next question, then I'll have you answer that one first. We only have a few minutes left, but I think we can quickly run through this one. As writers yourselves and not just readers, how do you consider gender when you craft your tales? Do you have goals or self-imposed guidelines on the subject when writing? Have you written stories that center gender, which I know some of those have come up already, but yes, if there's anything that hasn't come up that centers gender that you do want to talk about that you've written, please tell us. And yeah, we'll start with Chana.
I don't have any hard and fast rules yet. I'm still new in the game. And but I will say one of the best pieces of writing advice that I've received is, when you're not certain, just flip the main character's gender and see if anything plot-wise changes. And when that does happen, I do try to reconsider my character's decisions and really look into why they're what's the motivation behind that, and how much it depends on gender, and if I want it to depend on gender, or if it should depend on gender. I think I've learned something new, I think, from the question, because I do have a work in progress where I'm having fun with sentient plants and alternating reproductive cycles. But I think Phoebe brought up that point of like, should we always go to describing that as alien? And I have to think about that some more. So thanks. Thanks for that.
Sentient plants and reproduction. So if it was me writing the story, my thing would be to include a human non-binary character as well. One of the things I do, I have a lot of hard and fast rules. My friends joke about it. It's like Marie's rules. They're like, do you have these written down? I'm like, some of them. I never have just one gay character. Gays run in packs, so there's got to be at least two. If I have a African American character, there's going to be two. Just to avoid tokenism and avoid the concept that any individual character will be seen as me saying this is representative of the entire subgroup of people. When I was first starting writing, I would change the gender of characters randomly. I would flip coins. I did this when I discovered I had a personal bias where I was only writing men when they were romantic interests. I told you, I'm a female chauvinist pig. And I had to learn that. I was doing that. So to this day, I still occasionally stop and say, can I make this character male? Can I make this character female? Can I make this character non-binary? Can I change the race of this character? And I'm like, if I can't do that automatically, then I'm writing with biases. So I bias check myself that way.
For me, I will say, like, especially following off of Marie, like, I know I do have some biases that I am aware of because I personally do feel uncomfortable writing male characters. A lot of that just has to do with my own complicated grappling with gender as well, and being trans. It's something that's complicated. So a lot of my when I'm writing stories, a lot of my stories are more oriented towards transgender because that is something that I have a lot more experience with. It is taking the stories that I can tell and that I have direct experience with them and putting them full front because I feel like that is my responsibility, and also because like I'm not going to, if I screw something up in that, it's something that's coming from that the heart of a person who does experience those things as well. And sorry, just going back to that guidelines are more just like I try to make I try to put trans feels in a lot of stories, even though like a lot of them I do approach them with metaphors, like this thing is a metaphor for being transgender, but you might not necessarily, like, some people might not necessarily pick up on that if they're unfamiliar with what it feels like. But I still think it's important to get in there, and I do have a story coming up in Kaleidotrope next year called Climbing the Mountains of Me that is very, 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 very much informed by that. But that is more on the fantastic spectrum than the science fiction spectrum.
Metaphor can be such a good tool. Before I turn it over to Trevor, who will be announcing the Analog Award winner and finalist, Marie, Chana, Phoebe, do any of you have any last thoughts?
Love is real.
Don't be afraid to play with things that might make you uncomfortable in your fiction. After all, nobody sees your rough draft but you and your trusted first readers.
I just want to thank Emily, you and Trevor for the opportunity to even be here. Thank you so much.
Yes.
Thank you. Thanks to all three of you. It was so good to hear fiction from you in your voices and to have this discussion, which is so important. And I look forward to the other panels that will be further looking into this topic as the day progresses. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Trevor, who's going to talk a little bit about what the Analog Award is and announce the winners.
We can't hear you, Trevor.
Yeah.
He's not set mute. Oh, no.
I wonder if your
Phone
headset is
settings?
working.
Can you change microphones?
Every meeting's got to have some kind of technical. It usually does. It just usually happens at the beginning.
Phoebe, we already had our tech stuff at the beginning. We had a major one, so we're all set. We got Trevor covered.
Also, I will use this pause to say, buy my audiobook, Galactic Hellcats.
Okay, trying this again, just with the computer audio.
Yes, perfect. Thanks, Trevor.
Weird, I guess it was the headset. All right, well, thank you for your patience, everybody, and thanks, Emily. And thanks, of course, as well to all of the symposium organizers, Jill, Lynette, Lee, Kel, Lucas, Vivian, Sean, for their hard work. And also to City Tech's years of partnership with Analog for giving us the space to present both what we've been up to with the Analog Award in the past year and also where we're going with it next. As Jill and Emily have said, my name is Trevor Quachri. I'm the editor-in-chief of Analog Science Fiction, the oldest continuously published science fiction magazine on the market. This is now the third year of the Analog Award for Emerging Black Voices, which aims to provide mentorship to Black authors attempting to break into science fiction. You've already met Hannah, last year's winner, who we love and are tremendously proud of. You hear that, Hannah? And so we're thrilled to also be able to announce this year's winner, who is Sakina Hoffler of New Jersey, who we very much look forward to working with throughout 2024. Normally, I like to say something that ties the award to either the theme of the symposium that year or to wider science fictional ideas more broadly, but Sakina has sent me a statement, and it's better than anything I had, so I'm going to just read that in conclusion. She says, I am thrilled and humbled to be selected as this year's winner for the Analog Award for Emerging Black Voices. Growing up in an ultra-conservative Muslim community in New Jersey, where the line between right and wrong was drawn with a thick black marker, I discovered complication and nuance through reading and writing. I met characters who were different races, from different backgrounds, from all over the world or different parts of the universe. I witnessed other spiritual practices. I observed how a monster could become a person and a person could become a monster. I started to see gray all around me. I questioned everything. My questioning always got me into trouble, so I spent a lot of time on punishment, vanished to my room where I reread and eventually rewrote the endings of my favorite books, always asking, what if? What if life doesn't have to be this way? What if I also lived on Fear Street and had to battle ghosts and murderers? What if Jim Crow never happened? Where would we be? I could build worlds and no one could stop me. For a while, though, reality did. We have not figured out a way to live without money, and so we have bills. I buried my questions and became practical, pursuing a degree in chemical engineering. I spent years sitting in more rooms, but those rooms were filled with people dressed in uniforms and suits, making decisions about weapons while we were in the midst of 2 wars. Those rooms were cold, logical, full of statistics, and devoid of empathy, deadly. In those rooms, the walls were decorated with photographs of soldiers firing mortars or howitzers or shooting M16s. The type of photos taken on bright days with expensive cameras able to capture the taut look of concentration on each soldier's face and the billowing smoke right after the moment of fire. I once asked my boss why we didn't have any pictures of the weapons hitting their target. Where, I wondered, were the pictures of demolished homes, collapsed buildings, wailing children, dismembered bodies, dust? His response, why would anyone want to come to work and see that? What I didn't say at the time, but I wished I had, was because we need to see. By stripping people of the multifaceted stories and narratives, by stripping them of their humanity, we will continue to other. We will continue to be the protagonists in every story, lose empathy, and remain stuck in a never-ending cycle of receiving and delivering pain. We will never see what could be, how our world could be different, how we could live in peace. It's possible. We need science fiction. We need the Octavia Butlers, the Samuel Delaney's, the Ted Chiangs, the Isaac Asimovs, the N.K. Jemisin's, the Sophia Scimitars, and so on. We need the Analogs, the Strange Horizons, the Lightspeeds, the Fayas, the Clark's Worlds, and so on, to be our outlets for our imaginations. I'm thankful to the judges in Analog for selecting my work as this year's winner. I'm so excited to be mentored by wonderful editors. I'm thankful to all of you in this room right here, where there's hope and a belief in what science fiction is capable of. When it feels like the world is crumbling, or rather stacking up dystopian nightmares, climate disaster, totalitarianism, the pandemic, income inequality, decreasing autonomy over our bodies, war, etc., 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 It's stories that allow us to imagine how we can shift and shape our futures, how we can interact with technology, how we can live differently, how we can change the world by simply starting our questions with what if. Thank you all so much. And that's it. We're very enthused to be working with her in the next year. And thank you again, everybody at City Tech, and all of my panelists and authors. authors.
Thank you so much, Trevor. I feel like I want to cry. That was such a lovely statement, and we really thank Analog for providing this award and this elevation of these authors and this work. Emily, is there anything you or Trevor, we're a few minutes under, but so we have time if anybody wants to say anything else, or we can recoup some break again if folks want.
I'm fine to let people have a few extra minutes to stretch their legs. But thank you so much. It's always such a pleasure to be here and to hear all of these fascinating talks.
Yeah, so thank you again to Emily and Trevor and all of our writers here. And there's a lot of great links. I just want to draw everybody's attention to the chat. If you haven't been in there, we have a lot of great links to the award, to the authors you heard today, to their works, and lots of other wonderful things. So please do check it out. We're going to go on break, and then we'll come back at 1:20 for our next session. So thanks again, everybody.
Hello, everyone.
Just starting the next round of promoting the upcoming panelists, as you can see them popping up on your screen there. And then we'll get started in 1 minute.
Is there anything I have to do, like click on anything to get started, or just?
Nope, just get started when you're ready.
Lynette, I wish I had you all the time in my life, just behind the scenes, like seriously. You're amazing.